I was doing something controversial in the beginning of the year, which is complimenting the administration, controversial for Los Angeles,
Right.
and complimenting the administration because after we had the devastating fires this year, I will say that the administration poured and deployed a ton of Army Corps of Engineers here. As a matter of fact, it was a historic deployment in terms of its numbers.
Oh, really?
And it allowed us to clear out the Palisades in terms of the debris and to allow people to begin rebuilding quickly. And I complimented the administration, and then one day woke up and boom, we were invaded.
So talk a little bit about that and where that is right now. Like the world blew up in June at Reason, where I work. We wrote a lot about it at the time. And, the depiction that you got from a lot of people in the national media was that, oh my God, Los Angeles is on fire. And certainly the Trump administration said that. And there was the dudes doing donuts down in South LA and people dropping, bicycles, I think it was, down on the freeway overpass in the 101. It was a little bit rowdy and intense by the ICE building, but kind of that was it.
Well, the way I described it is, first of all, Los Angeles is 500 square miles. So the protest happened over about 3 blocks. And I would describe it as a Laker championship plus. Mm-hmm. So at the end of a championship, you have everybody all excited, and usually toward the end of the night, there's 100 or so people that linger around and might get involved in vandalism. I will not excuse the vandalism that took place during the protests. Some of the vandalism that took place was really awful in the sense that they defaced the exact institutions that represented immigration. So to have a expletive on Cesar Chavez's mural, or to have an expletive at the Japanese American Museum, which in my mind is hallowed ground, because that's the very land in which the Japanese were rounded up in buses and interned. And clearly the people that were there, in my opinion, didn't support immigrants to do that, and obviously didn't know the history. But the depiction that the city was on fire, the city was out of control, was just complete fiction. Los Angeles benefits from the fact that for decades we've had a rock-solid immigrant rights infrastructure here, a number of organizations that are highly experienced and professional and are used to putting on protests and always put on peaceful protests. But you can't account for the people that hang around at the end and what they might get involved in.
And the whole thing was kicked off not necessarily by protesters, but by stepped up immigration at the ICE building, I think it was?
No, what happened was, out of nowhere, we had multiple detainments, multiple enforcement actions at various places.
They're kidnapping her. They're kidnapping her.
Some of them literally took place down the street. You're walking down the street, you happen to look Latino, or somebody hears you speak Spanish. A car rushes up in front of you. Masked men jump out with rifles and throw you in the car. And then you have workplaces that are raided. You're at Home Depot, you're a day laborer, and the cars come in and chase you through the parking lot looking to capture you. Or you're working in a car wash and the cars pull in, the masked men jump out and capture you from a car wash. That's the chaos that was created in this city on June 6th. On a Friday, and it happened out of nowhere. There was no warning, no coordination.
No coordination
nothing.
At all.
No,
with the government.
Not at all.
LA is a sanctuary city. That term has its origins, from what I understand or remember, in the 1980s. Actually, it's sort of a sanctuary churches for Central American refugees of wars back then, but then later became to mean, we will not necessarily share information with the federal government because that is, and this is something that Rudy Giuliani supported, by the way, in the 1990s, because your local immigrants are not going to go and report crimes if they think that they're going to run risk themselves of being deported or detained in some ways. That's old. My old understanding of sanctuary city. What does sanctuary city of Los Angeles, what does that mean practically for you? What does it bind you to do?
Sure, where
Or not do, I should
you
say.
are correct in terms of the origins. It originated here for the same reasons, and actually it was earlier than the 80s. But we are also a sanctuary state, so it's enshrined in state law as well. And basically, the crux of it is that our local law enforcement are prohibited from coordinating enforcement actions with ICE. That got very confusing to understand in the midst of the lawlessness of the administration this time around. Enforcement actions have always taken place, but not in the manner, not in the reckless, lawless manner that you saw take place here in Los Angeles. It started in LA, but I was convinced right from the bat that we were the petri dish. They were going to experiment with us, and then they were going to take it around the country, and that's exactly what we've seen
Including
happen.
with the deployment of National Guard against the wishes of state and local.
I mean, essentially, what the administration did was they seized power from the governor. I mean, in a state, as you know, the governor is the commander-in-chief over the National Guard. The administration went in, seized that power, took over and federalized the National Guard and deployed them in our streets. But it was 100% performance. 4,000 National Guard were here, 700 Marines were here, and the majority of them were playing video games somewhere outside of the city of Los Angeles. The real on-the-ground deployment was probably about maybe 150 guards, men and women, that were deployed to guard two buildings. One was the federal building downtown that was the scene of a lot of protests. The other one was the federal building in Westwood where there were no protests.
Right. Walk us through again a little bit closer on the sanctuary city commitments. You said that, that you can't act in coordination with, in this case, ICE or Department of Homeland Security or Border Patrol. So there's an illegal immigrant or someone who might be an illegal immigrant is arrested for a crime in Los Angeles. Are you therefore sort of instructed not to inquire about that status, not
Right,
to
that's correct.
not to share that status if
That's
you learn
correct.
that status? What do you say to Americans like, you know what? It's an illegal immigrant, just like we think that a legal immigrant has just committed a crime. Why shouldn't you share that information?
Well, because you're focusing on the crime that the person committed, and that's really all you're obligated to. Anything after that is really under federal authority.
Sure,
so
but
share
why?
it for.
But why not share with? I mean, you served in Congress, and you were shortlisted for vice president, which we maybe talk about a little bit later. But you know, there are national implications to one's local job. So, is it not kind of shirking to not share that information? If
You know, I don't think so, but then let's talk about what we mean by that
Yeah.
for a minute. What kind of crimes? I think if somebody was involved in some kind of egregious act, if it was murder, if it was something, child abuse or something like that, that's different. If you just say any crime, then you're talking about what? If somebody was jaywalking, if it was, a very minor crime, why would you turn them over to the federal government? So that's where you get into things that are a little challenging.
but if it's a violent crime, for example,
But nobody, I mean, I don't know of anybody that has a problem with that. So, for example, if ICE was coming in doing what they said they were going to do, which is we're going after the worst of the worst, we're going after violent felons, we're going after people that have committed all these horrific crimes, I don't think anybody would have risen up in protest. But that is not what they did at all. I mean, the overwhelming majority of people that were detained had no criminal records at all. And then you had people who were here legally, people who had asylum claims, people who were showing up
at their
for their
meetings.
annual required immigration appointment and being detained. That was what people were protesting about.
Sure. Put it on a button on it. As far as you know, if someone is arrested for a violent crime, a thing that we don't like, hey, that person just punched a baby over there. It's hypothetical. Is that information then shared? If the LAPD discovers that that person is an illegal immigrant and does something that we all kind of agree is heinous, if convicted, is that shared? And if it's not, then
That's a good question. I don't know that it's proactively shared, but what I will tell you though is that there are certain databases, and I don't know the specifics of this, okay?
Yeah.
But there are certain databases that, whether they proactively share it, the federal government has access to.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because if you commit a certain crime, you're automatically in a federal database.
You're in an FBI database as
Right.
opposed to another kind of database. Fair enough. So we started talking a little bit about Trump. You obviously have an interesting relationship with him based a lot on the events of June and afterwards. Did you talk to him during that? You obviously
No.
talked in fires. So like what?
No, I reached out, but I, did not receive a call back. I was in contact with people indirectly and directly in the administration, but there was no communication during that time.
How would you characterize the impact? Not even exactly in that very contested and difficult week or so that it was, but since then, like what has been the tangible impacts on the people who live in the city of Los Angeles from these raids, these enforcement actions, and similar?
Devastating.
Has it?
Devastating.
Like, how do you
Well,
characterize it?
very, very specifically, we're coming on the holidays.
Yeah.
There's a number of people who have literally disappeared. They don't know where their mothers or fathers or relatives are because, in the beginning, they were not allowed to communicate with either legal counsel or their families. There have been some court decisions that have been upheld that have required that kind of communication, but the lawlessness of this administration does not mean that it's being followed. And so you had a blanket of fear that has spread over the city. I will say that it has not gone away. I'm not sure if it's as intense as it was before, because after all, people have to come out of their houses at some point. They have to go to work at some point. But I worry about some of the long-term consequences. For example, it is very expensive to live here. And a lot of families live in apartments with multiple people who are paying multiple paychecks. All you need is one of those paychecks to be gone to destabilize an entire family and to risk them falling, into homelessness. You have businesses that have gone under. When I heard restaurant owners describe this as worse than COVID, when restaurants were literally closed, but they survived because of, carry-out orders. But people now don't want deliveries, and don't want to leave their house for the carry-out. And you have sectors of our economy in the city that is, by the way, 50% Latino. You have sectors like the Garment District that is still a ghost town. You have families, especially during the time when the raids started, who didn't attend their kids' graduations. And you know how significant that is to a family. Well, you can't go to your kid's graduation because you're afraid that either your kid or you is going to be detained and deported in the middle of a graduation. So what has happened now is the raids continue. People are still being chased through Home Depot and through car washes
Here,
and
now.
other places, yes. What seems to have subsided somewhat is the street chases, the Latino walking down the street and being snatched off the street, where when the public witnesses it, it looks like a violent kidnapping. And so that seems to have, I would say the quantity has decreased, but the actions have not stopped.
So a lot of people, when they're assessing Trump's border policies, immigration policies, will agree with a lot of that. I find myself nodding in agreement too. I don't want, you should go after the worst of the worst and then maybe not wrestle the nanny in MacArthur Park.
Exactly,
that seems
or the
like,
gardener.
And flashbang grenades when they're not necessary,
Right.
and a bunch of other things besides, and have criticized that also. What I find challenging as someone personally who supports having more legal immigration, not less, and more
Right.
refugees, not less, the border is kind of under control right now. The chaos that we saw at the border spasmodically over the last, I don't know how many years you want to say, 10, but certainly a lot of chaos at the border appears to be over. Do you think that politicians, including in the Democratic Party, were kind of blasé about the chaos that preceded this at the border, and thus makes the counter arguments, the civil libertarian and humanitarian counter arguments, kind of be like, yeah, but.
I don't know. I think that what Democrats did, and again, I participated in this. I was there in Congress for 12 years. We focused almost exclusively on trying to get comprehensive immigration reform done. We also, I think, more times than not, spend our time being reactive. So working, I mean, it's proactive to do the legislation, but what we were doing reactively was responding to the abuses at the border, meaning people who were mistreated, or, you know, for me, I was deeply involved. Remember when they were deliberately tormenting families with child separation?
Sure.
And I've worked in children's issues for a long time. And the idea that years later, I know there's thousands of kids who will carry that trauma for their entire life of being taken away from their parents. And I also know that there's probably 1,000 young adults now in this country who've been unaccounted for, because when they were first separating, they didn't do proper paperwork. And we don't know what's happened to these folks. Are they being trafficked all around the country? Or, you know, we don't know. But I thought it was one of the most egregious moments in U.S. history. So in my last couple of years, I tried to do legislation that would hold the federal government accountable for reunification. You know, it's not required. So we'll take your child, but we're not required to reunite you. And I thought, one, that the federal government should be required, but I also thought that the federal government should pay damages to the families that I know that were going to have traumatized parents and kids for many, many years.